great time, and I thank you again. I mentioned this on Thursday night, but thank you for investing your time and effort and money to be here at the conference, and I pray that you've been encouraged and helped. I know you ladies enjoyed sharing. I told the fellows she's probably my favorite woman preacher, and she's not a preacher, she's a teacher. I don't want anybody to go out here and think I'm a heretic, and I never had heard her speak until just a few years ago, and I was in the office and one of our ladies called and she said, "Pastor, Miss Rabon's on BBN. I don't know if y'all have BBN, but it's Bible Broadcasting Network. She's on Bible Broadcasting Network right now, building blocks for the family." And they had called a few months before and said, "We've got some of your stuff and we'd like to use it." And so we just told them, "Yes, whatever you want to do." And so I listened to her, but she did like she did today. She went a little long. So they couldn't get it in there in 30 minutes. It went 2 days. So I didn't tell her I listened to her because I'd never heard it at that point. But they said part 2 would be the next day. So I listened the next day and I said, "Man, I heard you speak on whatever the subject was." And she said, "How'd you hear that?" I said, "You've been on BBN the last 2 days." But now, of course, with live stream, all that kind of thing, I've heard her. Matter of fact, she was speaking at a ladies' event that was live streamed, and so she started telling us something about me, and she said, "And he may be watching right now." I texted her and I said, "I am. You better be careful." But anyway, she's what she proposes herself to be. I've lived with her 41 years, and so if you haven't got one of her books, I encourage you. They're encouraging, uplifting, informative, instructive, and she's a great writer. I have not read all of it. I've only read the parts that she wanted me to read, that she wanted to make sure she was not doctrinally incorrect. She said, I've taken this verse and this is where I've gone with it. I'll make sure I haven't done a disjustice to the Bible. And, because a ladies' talk doesn't have to have much Bible. It just has to have stories. That's what my boys say. All a lady wants to do is make you cry. And once you cry, you're okay. And we have a big ladies' retreat every year. So we've been doing it for 30-something years. But I appreciate the opportunity, and it's been a good time for us. Well, I invite you to take your Bible and turn with me to the book of Hebrews chapter 13. Now, you'll see there, I also have Exodus 20:14. Exodus 20:14 I can quote to you, and we'll just not take the time to turn there. It says, "Thou shalt not commit adultery." That's what it says. Bottom line. Case closed. But look with me at Hebrews chapter 13, would you please? And verse number 4. Verse number 4, it says, "Marriage is honorable in all." That's a mouthful, isn't it? You know what that says? The writer's intent there is for us to understand how exalted marriage is in the sight of God. It's God's idea, right? He's the one who said somewhere on that 6th day of the creative week, it's not good for the man to be alone. He'll never find the remote or remember what day to put the garbage at the curb. Marriage is honorable in all. In everybody's eyes, marriage is honorable. Now, I understand in our culture, that's really changed in the last few years. But it's never changed in the eyes of God. Marriage is honorable in all. And look at the rest of that statement. "And the bed undefiled." That word undefiled means not made corrupt, impure, or unclean. The physical, intimate relationship inside of marriage is God's idea. God did not make us physical beings with sexual desires for just procreation. Somebody procreated something the other night here in a game. I can't remember who that was. Okay. And God didn't make it just for procreation, though I think that's part of the natural outcome most of the time, many times. But God also made it for the man and woman to be drawn together. We'll see that in just a moment. Marriage is honorable in all, and the bed undefiled, but whoremongers and adulterers God will judge. Father, help us these few moments to be encouraged and strengthened, and may our marriages, as a result of these days, be honorable to you. In Jesus' name, amen. Introduction statement number 1. God gave us the 10 Commandments not to cause us pain, but for our protection. Our protection. God is not a cosmic killjoy sitting up in heaven with a baseball bat in his hand saying, all right, just step over the line, I'm going to bop you on the head. Now, I'll be honest with you. That's the picture I had of God when I was a kid. Now, that's not a proper picture, okay? But I thought every time I disobeyed, God was just waiting. Ooh! You know? But that's not God. When God made a parameter for any activity, he did it to protect us. I think it's the 119th Psalm. I think it's verse 145. I will walk at liberty, for I seek thy precepts. You know what it says? It says there's freedom inside the boundaries. When you step over the line, when you go outside the boundary, I just talked to the guys about setting good boundaries for their parents. I mean, for their children, for the parents too. As parents get older, you have to set boundaries for them too. You have to tell your dad, my dad's 85, so I have to tell him every once in a while, you can't do that. You know what I'm saying? I mean, somebody contacted and guaranteed him $10,000 of Social Security benefit that nobody else in America knew about, but this man was just going to share it with my dad as soon as my dad gave me his checking account number. And so... You know, he's a liar, Daddy. He's a scammer. Are you sure, Tim? Daddy, just trust me. So kids need to know where the boundary is. They need to know when they step over the boundary, they're going to have a problem. Well, listen to me. God set boundaries. You know what the boundaries for physical, sexual, intimate relationship is? Marriage. Just as bad as premarital sexual relationship, extramarital. God set the boundaries. You stay in the boundaries, there's freedom. God didn't do that so he could punish you. God did that so he could protect you. There's a verse, I really don't know the full meaning of it. Your pastor probably does, all right? It says, every sin that man committeth is without the body, but he that committeth fornication sinneth against his own body. I have no idea all that means. I think it could mean sexually transmitted diseases. I think it could mean unwanted pregnancy. I think it means comparison with other partners. But I don't know the full extent of that. But that is a strong statement. Every other sin, God says, is without body. But that's committing a sin against your own body. That's the reason right before he makes that statement, he gives two strong words. 1 Corinthians 6:18. Flee fornication. Run. My hero in the Old Testament is Joseph. If I was just preaching to men at a men's conference, I'd probably preach on Joseph. I was just, last year, preached at a men's conference. I preached a whole series of messages, I think 4 times, on Joseph. I love Joseph. My favorite part of Joseph's life is that statement in verse 8 of chapter 39. It's that opening statement of that verse, but he refused. You know what? Joseph said no to Potiphar's wife. No. And he'd been over 10 years without any godly influence in his life. Wow, what a man. My hero, Joseph. So God gave it for our protection. Statement number 2, nothing destroys a family faster than adultery. Nothing. Nothing. I believe I can say that based on 1 Corinthians 6:18. No, it's a sin against your body, but there's nothing that destroys a family faster than adultery. If we left here today, and I don't know a whole lot about your city, but I know you have water, and we were on the same road, maybe Pines Boulevard out here, but I don't know if it does, and we got to a place where there was a bridge. And there was a big sign there with big red lights flashing, warning, 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 bridge out, bridge out. How many of us would say, I bet you they don't even know what they're talking about. Let's go. No, we'd heed the warning, right? Well, maybe not all of us, Joe, but most of us would. I'm joking. Right? We don't heed the warning. Well, that's what God's doing. Thou shalt not commit adultery. Marriage is honorable, all the bed undefiled. The whoremongers and adulterers, God will judge. It's just one big warning sign. So, statement number 3, God gave us the intimate relationship to build our marriages, not destroy them. I want you to go with me to a passage, and let's look there just a moment. I didn't ask you, preacher, what time do you want me through? Do you have a time? Okay. 1 Corinthians chapter 7. Would you go there? 1 Corinthians chapter 7. 1 Corinthians 7 is an interesting chapter. There's a lot of good stuff in here. He talks to married people. He talks to single people. He talks to folks without believing partners. It's a powerful chapter, really, on the subject of marriage. We're just going to zero in on the opening verses. Look at verse 1, chapter 7, verse 1. Now, concerning the things whereof you wrote unto me, it is good for a man not to touch a woman. Okay? So, and he uses this phrase more than just this once. So, the Corinthians must have written him about something. The city of Corinth would be the equivalent, maybe on steroids, of Las Vegas in our nation. Okay? They were corrupt. As a matter of fact, they were so corrupt that there was a common word used in Paul's day to speak about moral depravity. They would say of someone, they've been Corinthianized. they're so corrupt. All right. So it was a corrupt city. Temple of Venus was there. We're told probably employed over 1,000 temple prostitutes in their worship. And so undoubtedly somewhere along the line, these people have communicated with Paul and asked him about it's good for a man not to touch a woman. So Paul goes on to say, verse 2, nevertheless, to avoid fornication, that's physical relationship without marriage, let every man have his own wife, and let every woman have her own husband. Isn't that interesting how possessive that is? Every man his own wife, every woman her own husband. So God's plan has always been for marriage, one man, one woman, one lifetime. All right? So he says to avoid fornication, to not get caught up in the sexual pool of your culture, have a wife, have a husband. Now he does talk later about stay like him. You can focus on the ministry. I understand that. But then look at verse 3. Because verse 3, I think, is where he begins to talk about the physical, intimate relationship. Let the husband render unto the wife due benevolence, and likewise also the wife unto the husband. So I believe that phrase, due benevolence, is talking about the physical, intimate relationship. God established that, not to destroy us, but to draw us together. Yeah, and I'll probably say this again later, Every man wants to have a physical, sexual, intimate relationship with his wife on all the days that begin with T. Okay? Today and tomorrow. All right, so you saw it a while ago on the marriage translators. All right? So, why? Because it brings us together, but man has that desire too, and we'll talk about that in a few moments. But look at verse 4. The wife hath not power of her own body, but the husband, likewise also the husband hath not power of his own body, but the wife. So many times people try to take the New Testament and make it a male chauvinist book. It is never found here. As a matter of fact, we talked about a few moments ago, the command to the man is love your wife, 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 love your wife. So he said that they come together, and then he says, look at verse 5. Boy, this lifts the physical to the spiritual level. It says, defraud ye not one to the other. In other words, don't withhold the physical, intimate relationship, except it be with consent. That means you both agree. For a time, you set a limit on it. Number 3, it says that ye may give yourselves to prayer and fasting and prayer. It's for a spiritual purpose. And number 4, he says, and you come together again, that Satan tempt you not for your incontinency. So when a husband and wife agree not to have the physical relationship, it's always consent. It's always for a certain period of time. It's always to be for a spiritual purpose, fasting and prayer. And it's always at the end to come back together. God takes the physical and immediately connects it in this passage with the spiritual. So let's talk about this subject this morning, how to affair-proof your marriage. The problems. Now, I'm going to give these, okay? I want you to write down problems, and then I want you to look right here at me, all right? Here you go. Look right here at me. Not one problem I'm fixing to discuss is a legitimate excuse for adultery. Okay? I'm not giving these because I'm wanting you to say, well, that's our problem, and there you go, I can do what I want to do. No, I'm going to give you why people have told me over the years they did. The hardest situations, well, I'll hold back on that statement a minute. The hardest thing Sharon and I ever deal with in marital counseling is pornography. I've never dealt with an addiction like pornography. We do not have very many, what we would call from a human perspective, success stories. Because men who get caught in pornography, most of them started when they were young, and it is a all-out satanic war. But the second would be adultery. And the reasons we've heard. I'm going to give you 4 major problems that lead to it, but I really want to spend my time on the next part, the prevention. Let me give them to you, though. Unmet needs. Unmet needs. I talked about it, I think, yesterday morning. Everybody has a need for love, acceptance, and care. And you need those needs to be met, but you can't focus on yourself, you know. I heard somebody years ago say that the average marriage is like a tick and a dog. One got the other so they could get something out of it. And then he went on to say, but the real problem is when you have 2 ticks and no dog. You know, so you know, just unmet need. I'm not getting what I need. Number 2, unresolved conflict. Unresolved conflict. I'm telling you, I can't overemphasize last night. Communication, communication, communication. Ephesians 4:26, let not the sun go down upon your wrath, neither give place to the devil. You ought never go to bed angry. The first time Sharon and I had a spat, we'd probably been married about 6 months, a major spat. We had some spats before then. But about 6 months we've been married. I was a full-time college student. I went to school from 8 o'clock in the morning to about 12:30. Then I came home. We lived in a little apartment upstairs on the backside of a woman's house. I had a private entrance. And I'd get in the car. I'd get changed, get in the car, go to work. And then when I got off work at 7:30, I'd run home and we'd eat supper. And I think the first semester we were married, I was taking 17 hours of college credit. And she worked full time because somebody had to pay the bills. You know what I mean? Our rent was $200 a month, and our combined income was $600. The first 6 months we were married, I didn't stop and buy a Coca-Cola at McDonald's for 19 cents because I thought we were going to go bankrupt. Nobody ever taught me. That's one of the reasons I probably spent so much time in my boys' life teaching them how to handle money. That wasn't taught me. And so, you know, but anyway, we one night I come home. We've been married about 6 months. I felt this tension. So I asked her, what's wrong? Now, I didn't know it then, Albert. Nobody had told me this. But I didn't know the woman's number one response to the question, what's wrong, is one word. Nothing. Nothing. So, you know what I do? You know what I do as a man? I immediately think it's all my fault. It's all my problem. Yeah. So, we go through eating supper. I'm working on a paper. I'd write a page, she'd type. I'm not a very good typist. I do type a little bit, but not much. And it's old-fashioned. I'm talking about electric typewriter. Amen. We didn't have no word processor or nothing in those days, back in the 70s. And so all night long, on and off, I asked her, what's wrong? 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 Nothing. I'm racking my brain trying to figure out what in the world, why is this tension between us? And so that night for our family devotions, we've always read the Bible and prayed together as a single couple when we were dating all of our lives. I opened up the Bible. You know, when you can't whoop your wife, just get the Bible out and whoop her with that, you know. And so I opened up the Bible, Ephesians 4:26. Let not the sun go down upon your wrath, and you give place to that. I said, I heard somebody say that means you never go to bed angry. So we're fixing to make a rule in the Rabon household. We're never going to go to bed angry. So we're going to figure out what's wrong before we go to bed. Stupid, very dumb. I told you, you choose a better time than bedtime. But anyway, and for years I've used this illustration, and we couldn't remember. About 10 years ago, it dawned on us what it was. I worked at Vanderbilt University. I worked in the library. I was a sanitation engineer. Maybe you'd call it a janitor. But anyway, sanitation engineer sounds better. I was a sanitation engineer, and so I worked from 1:30 to 7:30, except for Wednesday. I got off at 6:30, so we'd go to prayer meeting. That's what we called Wednesday night service back in those days when I was college prayer meeting. And so we'd go to prayer meeting, and that day, I usually had a break at 5 o'clock. She got off work at 5 o'clock. She was from the town she's from it's not even a town. The community she's from has a blinking light, okay? They got the paper, today's paper tomorrow in the mail. They sent it in the mail. They didn't even deliver it out where she lived at. And so I always called her every day to make sure she got home safe. We were in Nashville, Tennessee. It was the biggest metropolitan area at that point we'd ever been to in our lives. And so I'd call her every day. Well, that day, I was working on a paper, and I could copy things in the library, but I couldn't check things out because I wasn't a Vanderbilt student, even though I was a Vanderbilt employee. And so I ran down to the Divinity Library. That's what they call their religious section. The Divinity Library, and I copied things on the copier. And I didn't call her. For the first time in 6 months of marriage, I didn't call and say, "Did you make it home safe? Are you okay?" And man, I promise you, I called her every other day. All right, but you know, it was not really that big a deal. It was a big deal, probably very big in her mind at that point, and undoubtedly, and so, but it was just unresolved conflict. You gotta talk out your problems. You gotta be honest. Gotta be open, and talk. Number 3, here we go. Unfulfilled expectations. Unfulfilled expectations. Most of the time, unfulfilled expectations come from a focus on ourself, like the 2 ticks and no dog. What do men really need? Men really need respect. What do women really need? Love. If you haven't ever read that book, there's another good book for you to get. Love and Respect. Both of his names starts with an E. Emerson Eggerichs. Is that right? Thank you. That's a great book. Man's basic need is respect. Woman's basic need is love. Unconditional respect, unconditional love. Like I say, I don't read everything in the book, but it is a good book. If you've never read that book, it starts off the first section. The book's called The Crazy Cycle, and first 5 chapters or so. All right. So number 4, undeveloped self-worth. Undeveloped self-worth. People excuse their adultery for one of these 4 reasons: unmet needs, unresolved conflict, unfulfilled expectations, undeveloped self-worth. The person that usually understands who he or she is really, number 1, I'm a Christian, I'm a child of God, I'm Sharon's husband, I'm Tim, Philip, and Joyce's dad. I'm Riley, Owen, Aubrey, Landon, Connor, Selah, Braylon, Bryson's Papa. I have to think through them sometimes. And, you're somebody. I heard Jesse Jackson years ago. I was at a youth conference in the Chicago area back in the 80s. Jackson was running for president. He had thousands of young people downtown Chicago, and he's having them repeat after him, "I am somebody," and they'd yell it back out, "I am somebody." And whether you agree with Mr. Jackson's political views, that's not what I'm here to purport. But you know what? It's a great truth. I am somebody in Jesus. And don't put yourself down. One of the struggles I had as a teenager was undeveloped self-worth. I was always about 4 foot tall and 4 foot wide, and so people always made fun of me and my weight and all kinds of things. My dad and mom never took a psychology class, but my daddy was probably the best psychologist that's ever lived. He taught me he told me, this is a statement I remember him making me several times when I'd be so down, so depressed, so discouraged. He said, "You know what? God didn't make a mistake when he made you, Tim. God made you on purpose. God's got a purpose for you." Okay, so all those reasons, none of them are ever excuse for a sinful choice. All right, but they're reasons I've heard. Number two, let's really talk about these things. The prevention. Number one, the prevention. Make a commitment to God's standard. Make a commitment to God's standard. Would you go with me to the book of Proverbs with me just a moment? Chapter number 5. Proverbs chapter number 5. This chapter, the entire chapter, all 23 verses, are really a strong warning to us through Solomon. The psalmist asks a question in Psalm 119:9. He says, "Wherewithal shall a young man cleanse his way?" And then he gives the answer, "By taking heed thereto according to thy word." And this is a word of warning here. Just read a few verses. Look at verse number 3. It says, "For the lips of a strange woman," not strange like odd, strange like she's not yours, okay? "For the lips of a strange woman drop as a honeycomb. Her mouth is smoother than oil, but her end is bitter as wormwood, sharp as a two-edged sword. Her feet go down to death. Her steps take hold on hell." Man, that doesn't sound like a path I want to travel, does it, you? So what does he say? He gets to talking about the marriage here in a minute. Look down at verse 15. "Drink waters out of thine own cistern, running waters out of thine own well." He's talking about the husband-wife relationship. Verse 16, "Let the fountains be dispersed abroad and rivers of waters in the street. Let them be only thine own." Talking about your husband, your wife, "and not strangers with thee. Let thy fountain be blessed, and rejoice with the wife of thy youth." She's not the same woman I did marry 41 years ago, but she's still the wife of my youth. It's the one when I was a young man I chose. God chose, I think, for me. Verse 19, "Let her be," this wife of thy youth, "as a loving hind in the pleasant roe. Let her breast satisfy thee at all times. Be thou ravished always with her love." I love that word, ravished. That's a powerful word to me. I'm ravished with this woman. I mean, you can't even say that just a ravished. I don't even sound good. Ravished. That's the way it sounds. I'm ravished with you. He said, I've made you to come together. Be committed. Look at verse 20. He doesn't leave this subject. This whole chapter is about it. "And why wilt thou, my son, be ravished with a strange woman and embrace the bosom of a stranger?" Number one, make a commitment to God's standard. No physical, intimate relationship before marriage or outside of marriage. I'll tell you how far Jesus went. He said, Matthew 5:28, "If any man look upon a woman to lust after her, he's committed adultery already with her in his heart." And I'm telling you, every man in this room is motivated by your eye gate. I used to think, Brother Dane, I had a lot of foolish thoughts when I was younger. I used to think there'll be a someday where a woman wouldn't even catch my attention. Well, it hadn't happened until at 61. Okay? Still something I battle with today. And I'm honest and open with that, with sharing. So, listen to me. But my temptation is never a reason for me to continue. You know what? I can't prevent some thoughts from going through my mind, but I can prevent those thoughts from staying in my mind. Old Chinese proverbs, you can't keep a bird from flying over your head, but you can keep him from building a nest in your hair. Confucius say. I don't know. Make a commitment to God's standard. Number two, magnify the consequences. Magnify the consequences. Go to chapter 6 of Proverbs just a minute. Chapter 6. Look at verse 32. "But whoso committeth adultery with a woman lacketh understanding. He that doeth it, look at those last 4 words, destroyeth his own soul. The fallout from your failure to obey God's command about the physical, intimate relationship is destruction to your soul. You know what we have to become convinced of? We have to become convinced of the fact that the blessings of marriage outweigh the burdens of adultery. For 41 years of life, well, really for 61 years of life, but 41 years of marriage, Sharon's the only lady I've ever known physically. We're the only intimate partners each other have had. There's nothing, no blessing that compares with that. I don't have any, years ago we had Johnny Pope. We do a youth conference every December, have for 32 years or so. And Dr. Pope was preaching, he's preaching on sexual purity. And he told the teenagers, I'll never forget it, he told the teenagers that every intimate partner you had got put in the computer of your brain, and that if you had multiple intimate partners before you came to marriage, when you got to marriage, that what your brain would want you to do is compare your present partner with a past partner. Man, I never got over that. I thought, wow, that's great advice to a teenager. So you got to magnify the consequences. Because every choice has a consequence. Now, that is a philosophy of life we've forgotten in American culture. Magnify the consequences. Number 3, maintain your marriage. Maintain your marriage. In other words, do your part. Now, I'll go ahead and tell you, ladies, what I told the men, because in case they forgot to tell you. The success and happiness and joy in your marriage or home is dependent upon your husband as a leader, okay? But I believe every lady in here has a responsibility to maintain your marriage as well. I'm going to give you this. You may have read this book. If you haven't read this book, it's a good book to read too. It's Willard Harley's His Needs, Her Needs. The 5 top needs of a man, his needs, and then 5 top needs of a woman, her needs. Number 1, this isn't going to be any surprise if you've been married more than 3 hours. Sexual fulfillment. Sexual fulfillment. All right? That's just the way God programmed us. God made us. And inside of marriage, it is beautiful. Number 2, recreational companionship. Recreational companionship. Your husband enjoys doing something with you that he enjoys doing. I'm not a man of a lot of hobbies. If I have a hobby, it's playing golf. Okay? I enjoy playing golf. And so, did you talk about that already? Okay. Okay. Man, she's killed my whole illustration. Yeah. I wanted her to learn how to play golf for all you guys. And so we borrowed some clubs and we went out. And about the 3rd time we were out, she said, only God knows how many times I've hit that ball before I got up here on this green. Would it be all right with you if I just drive the cart? And so that's what we've been doing for 40 plus years. We just let her drive the cart, all right? And but I still enjoy it. I don't mind going out and playing with a bunch of guys, and I like playing with a bunch of guys. But every once in a while, I just want to go out and play golf. And Sharon, and the good thing is she doesn't understand golf very well, so she thinks what I do is pretty good most of the time. I mean, the water, she knows that's probably not good, and the sand trap, but I'm a good bunker shooter because our golf coach on our school golf team taught me how to flop it out. And so I don't mind getting into sand unless it's a fairway sand trap, and then I'm not too good at it. But the one up near the green, I'm okay. And so just recreational companionship. Your husband wants you to do something together that you both enjoy. It may be taking a walk. It may be, whatever. Maybe run a marathon. I do run 26.2 feet every once in a while to the refrigerator. All right. Number 3, an attractive spouse. Every husband wants an attractive spouse. Well kept. I'm not talking about somebody that just stepped off a cover of something. Matter of fact, whatever cover they're on, they probably got a lot of makeup done before they even got the picture for the cover. But attractive spouse. Number 4, domestic support. Domestic support. You know, one of the things that the aged women are to teach the younger women, Titus 2:5, is to be keepers at home. And I know we probably all have a little bit of philosophy difference on what that means, and I'm not trying to give you my strong opinion on that. But I do think that the woman's to be the manager of the house. She's to keep the household running. If a husband, and he may have to help her with some things, and I understand all that, okay? Number 5, admiration. Admiration. Every man wants a cheerleader. Every man wants a cheerleader. Now, what are the 5 top needs of a wife? Number 1, affection. Isn't that interesting? Affection. You know what? She's not interested in the event of the physical intimacy. She's interested in the environment. That's what she's interested in. She wants to know she's loved. Number 2, conversation. She wants a conversation. Now, let's just be honest about it. Most of us men aren't good at it. She doesn't want a solution. You know what she wants when she gets in a conversation? Sympathy. Now, I think solution, right? I remember one day Sharon and I walking out of our church before we built the present auditorium we're in, and when you walked out the door, our car wasn't more than 20 feet away, and we've walked down the hallway maybe 35, 40 feet. We're walked another 20 feet to the car, so we've been walking for 45 seconds or so, and she's explained a problem to me between this man and his wife in our church, and she's talked with the wife, and so I opened the door to get her in the car, and I said, well, let me just tell you what they need to do. You know, because I've already figured it out. I mean, I've been listening 45 seconds. They probably had a 45-minute conversation, but, you know, step 1, step 2, step 3, I got a solution. And she looked at me and she said, I didn't tell you this for you to solve it. I told you this so you'd know it. Yes, ma'am. In other words, she wanted to talk about the conversation on the drive home. She wasn't planning on just, you know, in a minute, I solved it all. So she wants conversation. Number 3, she wants honesty and openness. Honesty and openness. Probably nothing is going to hurt your wife more than catching you in a half-truth or a half-lie or whatever you want to call it. Number 4, she wants financial support. She wants financial support. That may not mean everything she wants, but she wants to know that everything's okay. We're going to make it. Number 5, she wants family commitment. Family commitment. She doesn't want just commitment to you and her. If you have children, she wants you to be committed to your family. She wants you to be committed to your grandchildren. You have grandchildren. She likes that. My wife invests a lot in our grandchildren. I don't do as much as she does, but I'm committed to make sure she can do what she wants to do. I want her to be able to have that time, invest that time. Family commitment. So you have to be supportive of family wholeness. So here's the bottom line in these understanding, maintain your marriage. You must learn what it is that your spouse needs and meet them to the best of your ability, even if they are not your needs. You must learn what it is your spouse needs and meet them to the best of your ability, even if they're not even if they're not your needs. Number 4. Manage your mind. Mind. You know where the battleground for every temptation begins? In your mind. Dr. Getch has a book. I think it's called The Battle for the Mind. I think it's What's on Your Mind. It's a great book. I've used it several times with men in counseling. What's on your mind? Every battle begins in your mind. As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he, the writer of Proverbs said. James said every man is enticed when he's drawn away of his own lust. Listen to me. If you follow the natural pathway of your natural mind, you're going the wrong way. You got to control your mind. Paul said to Timothy, 2 Timothy 2:22, flee also youthful lust. Run. I do believe that there are some things that you ought not even pray about, you ought to just run from. You know how most adulterous relationships happen? I read this years ago. I don't even remember the source of it. But here's how they happen. Number one, you accept a negative thought about your spouse in your mind. You get a negative thought. She doesn't really love me. She doesn't really meet my needs. He doesn't really care about me. He's not really supporting me. Whatever it is, you accept a negative thought in your mind. Number two, you have emotional, non-physical involvement. You just connect. That's the reason it's dangerous to talk to anybody, and I think I'll say this a little later in a fill in the blank, but it's dangerous to talk to anybody about any problem you're having in your home that's of the opposite sex than you are. I don't care how old, how young, how ugly, how pretty, how whatever. Sharon and I can tell you about a couple. He is 40-something years older than her. He was rotund, pleasantly plump, whatever you want to call him. She was small and attractive. And she got to talking to him about her marriage. And the next thing happened, they run off. He leaves his wife of probably 50 years for this young girl that's going to leave him in probably 50 days. Emotional, non-physical involvement. Then number three, there's physical involvement. I'm not talking about the physical, intimate relationship, but just the holding of hands. It may be a kiss. It may, and then number four, you rationalize your actions and you justify your sin. So you got to manage your mind. Number five, maintain proper relationships. Maintain proper relationships. You've got to always treat each other properly. Go with me to Ephesians 5 just a moment. Ephesians 5. It's amazing when you get to looking at this kind of subject how much the Bible speaks to it, isn't it? I think we probably discard portions. And I know you can't talk about this. You know, pastor can't get up and say some of the things I've said here Sunday morning. Okay, I understand that. They're children sitting there, and I understand that. But in this kind of setting, it's just always been my philosophy, and I probably should have asked Brother Keeley. I don't know that I specifically asked. It's always been my philosophy in a couples meeting like this just to be plain and honest, okay? I mean, it's just us, all right? So you're in Ephesians 5. Look at verse 1. Be ye therefore followers of God as dear children. Walk in love as Christ also hath loved us and given himself as an offering, sacrifice to God for sweet-smelling Savior. I believe that walk in love, I understand that the primary context is inside of a local New Testament church, but I told you last night before Sharon and I were husband and wife, we were brother and sister, okay? So I ought to walk in love toward her. She ought to walk in love toward me. But then he goes into the subject we're talking about, verse 3. But fornication and all uncleanness or covetousness, that's wanting somebody besides your husband or wife, let it not be once named among you as becometh saints, neither filthiness, nor foolish talking, nor jesting, which are not convenient, but rather giving of thanks. For this ye know, that no whoremonger, nor unclean person, nor covetous man, who is an idolater, hath any inheritance in the kingdom of Christ and of God. Let no man deceive you with vain words, for they, because of these things, what things? Whoremonger, unclean, covetous, idolatry. Because of these things cometh the wrath of God upon the children of disobedience. Be ye not therefore partakers with them. So you got to maintain proper relationship. Do you understand that most adulterous relationships happen between friends, family, and co-workers? Friends, family, and co-workers. So here's some guidelines, and I'll give them to you quick because I do know the time. Number one, do not let the opposite sex share personal thoughts and feelings with you. I told you I thought I had to fill in the blank for that. Do not let opposite sex share personal thoughts and feelings with you. If a woman begins to share something that I think is improper with me, I mean, I've had it happen in the foyer of the church, okay? I just say to her, you need to talk to Sharon. Listen, that will shut it down. I don't care if you're in the break room at work and the person you're talking to doesn't know your wife. Sir, if you just say to that woman, you know what, I don't need to know this. If you want to talk to my wife, she'd be glad to give you counsel. Same thing for you ladies. Some guy starts sharing something with you, he's on an expedition. You don't even realize it. You just need to say to him, sir, I'm sorry. You're having these kind of big bad deals, but my husband's a good and godly man, and he'd be glad to help you. You know? Number two, ladies, do not fish for compliments. Men, watch what you say to women. Ladies, do not fish for compliments. Men, watch what you say to women. You understand what you're doing. Most folks aren't ignorant. Number three, beware of electricity. You know what it takes? A spark. And the fire's on. We have a couple that Sharon and I dealt with. The lady had gone into an adulterous relationship. And she told us, she said, Pastor Sharon, I don't know if she addressed both of us. We're sitting around the table here, her and her husband and us. She said, I know where it started. Okay, tell us when. She said, it started when he took my hand and said, that's a beautiful ring. She was sitting at a receptionist desk in a business. He was a client of the business. He had come in, I don't know, I won't say if they had ever met before or not, but he took her hand in his hand and said, well, that's a beautiful ring. And she said, right then, it started. Now, her and her husband have a little difficulty at home, sure. And she said, right then, just a touch. Number four, avoid a prolonged stare. Avoid a prolonged stare. We had I think I'm okay with telling this later. I'm telling it. We had a fellow who used to be on our staff. He left us, went to another ministry anyway. Some years later, he came out, he'd been in multiple relationships. And he told me, he and his wife, it's a wonderful story of grace. They came back together, their marriage is restored. They're both probably in their 70s now, aren't they? And retired and just having loving life. But he told me, he said, Tim, a lot of women I got with my eyes. He told me one night, he said, I was in a hotel, we spent the night. I went down to get ice at the ice machine. There was a woman there. I made eye contact with her. We went to her room before I went back to my room with the ice. And he said, I communicated and she communicated with me. We were both hurting and needed help. Wow. You know, that makes me want to walk around with my eyes closed. You know? Number five, avoid a lingering touch. And I've already kind of talked about touch, so I won't go back there. But we're all touch sensitive. But especially a woman. She's touch sensitive. So we've talked about make a commitment to God's standard, magnify the consequences, maintain your marriage, manage your mind, maintain proper relationships. Here's the last one we'll be through. Minimize the opportunities. Minimize the opportunities. I think this was spoken by Abraham Lincoln, but I can't 100% give you the source of it. I ought to Google it sometime. I probably could find it now. If you do not want to get stung, don't play with bees. If you don't want to go into an adulterous relationship, don't put yourself in places where you think you would go into that relationship. If it's a person that maybe it's happened with before or whatever, don't put there. Put up guards, put up roadblocks. I used to teach our teenagers about purity. If you lived in Raleigh, North Carolina, you'd know that there's a U.S. highway, Highway 70, that if you get on it going east, the next major city is Goldsboro. It's about an hour away. Matter of fact, our daughter, son-in-law, 3 grandchildren live in that city today. So I used to tell the teenagers, I'd say, let's make Goldsboro represent fornication, immoral, illicit relationship outside of marriage. How do you not get to Goldsboro? You don't get on 70 East. If you get on 70 East, whether you're walking, riding your bicycle, a motorcycle, or a car, if you stay on 70 East long enough, you know where you're going to end up? You're going to end up in Goldsboro. I promise you. If you don't want to go into adultery, don't get on the road. Don't get on the road. Minimize the opportunities. Brother Keeley went to Crown College, so he'll know Brother Sexton real well. He's the pastor of Temple Baptist Church, president of Crown College, Powell, Tennessee. His first secretary, when he came there, I don't know how long he's been there now, 30 years probably, hasn't he? Huh? More than 30. His first secretary was left over from his last pastor. She happens to be the sister of one of my good friends, an older preacher that's retired. She told her brother this, and he told me. Dr. Sexton had a rule. The rule was for her that she could never come across the front of his desk. His desk is in, I've been in his office, but I can't remember all the setup. But he told her, don't ever pass, there's an imaginary line from this corner of my desk to that wall, from this corner of my desk to that wall. Don't ever, if you have to give me something when you come in here, you reach across the front of my desk and hand it to me. Do not ever come past the front corner of my desk. She said he emphasized it for the first little while. And she said that he'd probably been there about 6 months. And she'd worked for the previous pastor, and he kept her on, and that's probably a wise move for a guy who's coming into a church, because she probably knows a lot more about the church than he does, right? And she said one day she had something he needed to sign. And she said, I just forgot. She said, I just forgot. I just stepped right past, and she said, when I stepped past that imaginary line, he jumped up and hit his hands on that desk. Get back! Get back! Get back! She said, it scared me to death. You know what Dr. Sexton's living by? He's living by this principle. It's better to go overboard than fall overboard. So what you got to do is minimize the opportunities. Now you say, Pastor Rabon, what if I'm sitting here this morning? I'm in an adulterous relationship today. I have been in the past. What do I do? Well, you're not without hope. One of the greatest prayers in all the Bible is the prayer of David after adultery of Bathsheba and murder of Uriah. It's the 51st Psalm. And the good news is God can forgive you. But if you are or have been, and it's fairly recent especially, I think there's 4 things you can do. Number 1, you confess it to God. Ask God to forgive you. Number 2, you confess it to your mate. You're not going to stop it unless you let your husband or wife know. You say, I don't think they can take it. Well, if you don't think they can take it, then why don't you get Pastor and Joy to go with you when you tell them? Sharon, I've had to do that. But you got to make it right with your mate. Okay? Number 3, you isolate yourself from the person. I don't care who they are. I don't care how you have to do it. If it's work and you have to quit, quit. What's the loss of job compared to loss of marriage? Nothing. And then number 4, you go on and rebuild. And it can be done. I gave you the example of that fellow used to be on our staff. It can be done. It's not an easy job. How do you go on and rebuild? I'd suggest you do 2 things. Number 1, you seek biblical counsel. It could be Pastor Joy. It could be someone else that you have great confidence in, but Pastor Joy would be my first choice. And you also make yourself accountable. Sharon and I have tried to help many people. Some of them preacher boys out of our church that had to come home. It's not easy, but it can be done. So you know what's better than all that? Prevent it in the first place. If it hasn't happened, determine in your mind it will not happen. And listen to me. It all comes down to our choices. Let's bow our heads for prayer, please. Won't you take your mate by the hand again and pray together. Commit yourself to the Lord as we close out this meeting. Commit yourself to each other. Father, we thank you for the gift of marriage. You said in your word, he that findeth the wife findeth a good thing. Lord, I know that's true in my life. Outside of you, the best thing that's ever happened to me is Sharon. And I thank you for these years. And if we didn't have another day after this one, I'd go home a happy man. Lord, help us to be faithful. Faithful to you and faithful to each other. Help these dear couples, Lord. Help them. Some of them may be committing things for the first time. Some may be recommitting. Some may have sin they need to face with you and with each other. Give grace, Father. Thank you for your mercy. They're new every morning. Great is thy faithfulness. Help us to be faithful to you and faithful to each other, so long as we both shall live. In Jesus' name, amen.
And so we have one last quick admonition video. Brother Kenny, why don't you go ahead and show that real quick, and then we just got a few thoughts and we'll be done.
It's just, there's all this pressure, you know? And sometimes it feels like it's right up on me, and I can just feel it, like literally feel it in my head, and it's relentless. And I don't know if it's going to stop. I mean, that's the thing that scares me the most, is that I don't know if it's ever going to stop.
Yeah. Well, you do have a nail in your head.
It is not about the nail.
Are you sure? Because, I mean, I'll bet if we got that out of there...
Stop trying to fix it.
No, I'm not trying to fix it. I'm just pointing out that maybe the nail is causing...
You always do this. You always try to fix things when what I really need is for you to just listen.
Yeah, see, I don't think that is what you need. I think what you need is to get the nail
See,
out.
you're not even listening now.
Okay, fine. I will listen. Fine.
It's just, sometimes it's like, there's this achy, I don't know what it is. And I'm not sleeping very well at all. And all my sweaters are snagged. I mean, all of them.
That sounds really hard.
It is. Thank you. Ow!
Come on, if you would just.
Don't.
Try to see things.
Here it is, last one. 30,865. 30, right here.